Good morning, everyone, once again. As Marco just said, unfortunately, I'm today in Podgorica because I had some fixed obligations. So I'm very sorry for not being able to join you all in Budva. I hope that there will be some other opportunities to meet within our project, especially regarding the social event we are going to have in this beautiful day, I suppose, in Budva, as well like it is in Podgorica here. So let me introduce myself for those of you who does not know me. My name is Ivana Vojinović, and I'm director of the Center for Climate Change, Natural Resources and Energy here at University of Donja Gorica. I'm also a lecturer here at the Faculty of Polytechnics in the area, which are going to present today in the next about 20 minutes. As you can see, the title of my presentation is the overview of actions taken so far in Montenegro in the area of climate change. The structure of my presentation is the following one. I'll present you what are the main characteristics of climate in Montenegro. Then the main focus of my presentation is going to be fulfillment of obligations of Montenegro in the EU accession process so far in the area of climate change. And at the very end of presentation, I'm going to present very briefly what should be done in Montenegro in the area of climate change in order to be fit and ready to fulfill all the obligations that the EU is imposing to Montenegro in order to join European Union. So let's start with these main characteristics of climate in Montenegro. As you know, on a very small territory of Montenegro, which is less than 14,000 square meters, there are big differences between the climate of the coast and the climate of the high mountain region, with many transitional forms of the local climate. The entire area of Montenegro is exposed and very vulnerable to many climatic hazards, such as floods, droughts, forest fires, and heat waves. And due to the increasingly pronounced negative impact of climate change we are experiencing over the last years, especially Montenegrin forests, which are covering about 60% of the entire Montenegrin territory, are very threatened, especially in this coastal area. Where are you today? And this central region of Montenegro. The most recent data on phenology of would indirectly indicate the presence of the consequences of climate change here in Montenegro. In addition to that, very high air temperatures, which we are going to experience also during this summer, and typical vegetation are always each and every summer are leading to the occurrence of many forest fires. The coast of Montenegro is also very vulnerable to rising sea levels and decreasing rainfall. Regarding these marine ecosystems, it is expected that the predicted climate change will lead to a faster eutrophication of some parts of marine waters, and the introduction of new invasive alien species, especially from southern geographical zones and regions. Now going to the core of my presentation regarding the fulfillment of obligations of Montenegro in the EU accession process. In the area of climate change, let me just briefly inform you that Montenegro, being a candidate country for the accession to European Union, opened the negotiation process in Chapter 27, which deals with the area of climate change back in December 2018, and during the opening during the intergovernmental conference, during which Chapter 27 was officially opened between Montenegro and the EU. Montenegro got from European Commission the so-called common position, within which the total of 8 closing benchmarks were defined for Montenegro that must be fulfilled in order for Montenegro to join European Union as far as Chapter 27 is concerned. And out of that 8 closing benchmarks, one benchmark is totally related to the area of climate change, and it's written on this slide in the following way. Montenegro continues its alignment with the EU acquis, in particular by adopting the law on functioning of the EU ETS in accordance with the EU ETS directive and its successive amendments. You know that a couple of months ago, European Parliament adopted new, very important amendments to this piece of legislation. Then Montenegro is further aligned with the relevant bylaws on monitoring and reporting, accreditation and verification, EU registry, free allocation and auction. And Montenegro ensures that there is an appropriate framework for the implementation of these pieces of legislation and so on. So what was done so far in this area in the process of EU integration? Still, Montenegro has a pretty modest, so to say, level of alignment on climate change in our legislative framework. So the revision of all relevant climate legislation should be one of the main priorities in order to ensure full alignment of Montenegro with the EU climate law, remaining parts of these mentioned EU ETS directive, effort sharing regulation on governance, etc. Here, what it should be borne in mind is the fact that full implementation of many acts in the area of climate change is only possible once Montenegro fully joins the European Union. But what we should do in this pre-accession period is to establish an infrastructure for the implementation of the entire legal acquis in this area. Also, as of 2015, here in Montenegro, we have a national climate change strategy until 2030. But this strategy only deals with these mitigation measures and part of climate change policy, because at that time, even European Union was lacking comprehensive EU adaptation strategy, which was only adopted in 2021. So now Montenegro is in the process of developing the very first national adaptation plan, which will cover these adaptation measures, which are becoming much more relevant than mitigation measures. Also, as a country, we are signatory to all international conventions and agreements in this area, such as United Nations Framework Convention on Climate Change, Paris Agreement on Climate Change, Vienna Convention, Montreal Protocol, and so on. Although Montenegro is very small, so to say, greenhouse gases emitter, by ratifying all these international conventions and agreements in this area, actually Montenegro joined all world countries that take an active role in international efforts to tackle the issue of climate changes. Also, preparation of low carbon development strategy is something which is an important task that is awaiting our country. What has been done in the area of implementation of these pieces of legislation? Very important is the fact that Montenegro Prior to the ratification of Paris Agreement in 2015, we calculated our first so-called national determined contribution, and we committed ourselves to reduce greenhouse gases emissions until 2030 by 30% as compared to 1990 as a baseline or reference year. In 2021, we revised that national determined contribution, which, however, was increased at the level of 35% of a reduction until 2030. However, this new NDC was envisaged by European Commission as not so ambitious task. Do you see my presentation because something was interrupted?
No, we can't. Okay, we can see it now. Okay, it's all okay.
Okay, yeah. Now it's returned back. Well, just to repeat that in 2021, we revised our national determined contribution at the level of 35%. Reduction, however, that was seen by European Commission as not enough ambitious targets, so we are obliged to make it much more at the same time realistic, ambitious, and fully implementable as far as Montenegro is concerned. What else has been done so far? Montenegro introduced a full regulatory framework to limit GHG emissions from both industrial and energy plants, which we are not hearing too many in our country. All relevant operators which should participate in emission trading system here in Montenegro so far were identified, and according to the special government decree adopted by the government, each and every operator is obliged to pay minimum price of emission credits, which is currently set at 24 euros per CO2 ton emission. These funds, which are paid by our operators such as thermal power plant, aluminum plant, and so on, they are paid to our eco fund, which is using this money to finance many projects in the area of climate change, environment, energy efficiency, and so on. Also, recently, government adopted the third biannual update report on climate change, which is one of the obligations that Montenegro has being signatory and party of UNFCCC. What is very much important is that our national inventory of GHG emissions for the period 1990 until 2019 has been adopted, and this national inventory of greenhouse gases is covering the following direct GHGs, such as carbon oxide, methane, nitrogen oxide, and all relevant synthetic gases. This national inventory was prepared and developed according to the IPCC Intergovernmental Panel on Climate Change Methodology from 2006, and by using a special technical tool, special software for its development. Here on this slide, you have a presentation of a total GHG emissions expressed for sure in a CO2 equivalent for this analyzed period. And on the next slide, there are total GHG emissions expressed in CO2 equivalent per each sector, which are seen as the main sectors emitting GHG emissions here in Montenegro. In the next couple of slides, I'll go through each of them just to explain you where we stay and how they are contributing to the negative and adverse effects of climate change here in Montenegro. First of all, regarding energy sector, and when we are speaking about energy sector, we are speaking about, first of all, burning of fossil fuel in the production and consumption of electricity in the sectors such as industry, residential, and public commercial sector, burning of liquid gases and biofuel in mobile sources, and also fugitive emissions that occur during production, transmission, processing, storage, and distribution of fossil fuels. And this energy sector is definitely the main source of GHG emissions of anthropogenic origin, with a share of 75%. The largest share in emissions from the energy sector is the production of electricity based on coal in thermal power plant Pljevlja. This is the only base power station based on coal here in Montenegro, whose share in the overall energy mix of Montenegro is at the level of about 40 to even 50%. Also, methane emission level is in this specific sector is low as compared to other GHG and refers to other energy activities and fugitive emissions from coal mine Pljevlja. Since 2011, we have increasing trend as far as emissions caused by consumption of biomass are concerned. Also, as a part of our activities in energy community and joining the energy community, Montenegro took over the obligation to implement certain elements of the previously valid on the EU level decision on effort sharing. Goals have been established for the improvement of energy efficiency and to increase the share of renewable energy sources in the overall energy mix and energy consumption. So we undertook the obligation to fulfill and to implement decision on promotion of the use of energy from renewable energy sources. And we set our national goal of 33% of renewable energy sources in the total final energy consumption in Montenegro, and that goal was reached and fully implemented in 2020 when the electricity produced in plants using renewable energy sources in the total electricity produced in that year was at the level of even 54%, which, as I've said, confirmed the fulfillment of these national goal that Montenegro took over. As far as transport is concerned, GHG emissions from the transport sector record an increase over the years, which is in accordance with a much higher volume and the number of vehicles on our roads, meaning that participation of actually road transport dominates with more than even 90%. And this is mostly pronounced in urban areas, such as, for example, capital city of Podgorica, which also suffer from the associated problems with high air pollution. Also, we have a prediction of the coming increase in road trips throughout Montenegro. We had our first section of the highway, which is in function from summer last year. There will be continuation of its construction of new road corridors and so on. Also, our transport sector is one of the main sources of nitrogen oxide emissions. Also, through the annual fuel quality monitoring program, the entire set of regulations concerning the reduction of GHG emissions from fuel is also implemented. Here in Montenegro, I already said that the road traffic and road transport dominates because here in Montenegro, we do not have intensive marine transport and traffic, which we used to have maybe 30 years ago and so on. And we have a very low GHG emissions from railway traffic, which 12 years ago was reoriented from diesel fuel to electric locomotives. Also, there is no air traffic within a country, while emissions from international air traffic make up about 6.7% of total emissions in this area. Regarding the industry, in the field of industry production, the main sources of emissions are related to the aluminum plant, a company which is in bankruptcy, and gases from all cooling devices. And here we have diverging trends. I'll explain. Well, since 2009, due to the significant reduction in the volume of aluminum production and some technological improvement, emission of almost all synthetic gases from aluminum production decreased, and this until that dominant share of aluminum industry in the total CO2 emission somehow decreased. On the other hand, much more frequent use of refrigerators, especially air conditioners, as I've said, increased, especially in our households. So emissions from that sources significantly are on some kind of rising trajectory. Methane emissions from industry sector mostly come from the iron and steel industry, from the former steel company that we have here in town of Nikšić. Then going to agriculture and land use, which is especially relevant to our common project. Total emissions with sinks from agriculture and land use sector. These are actually deforestation, forests affected by fires and firewood cutting, accounted to less than 2,000 gigatons, and emissions from enteric fermentation is the most significant in the entire agricultural sector, with a share of 75% of total emissions, while the remaining 20% refers to the share of emissions from manure management. GHG emissions from the agricultural sector decreased in almost all segments in Montenegro. First of all, due to the decline in livestock production and decrease in the total animal population. Also, agriculture, as we know, is a source also of methane and nitrogen oxide emissions. The share of emissions from enteric fermentation in the livestock subsector is around 80%, so to say, of total methane emissions, and the share of direct soil emissions ranges from 27 to 32% of total nitrogen oxide emissions. Now, in this area of agriculture and land use sector, definitely the most important activity, if that is possible to be said like that, are so-called sinks in the forestry subsector, which depend on the area covered by forest, wood mass, and those areas and which are damaged and by significant forest fires. So here in Montenegro, due to the fires, sinks and emissions from forest land vary from, for example, as you can see on this slide, exact figures from minus 2,000 CO2 emissions to in 2009 to minus 670 in 2011, when high emissions were recorded in the forestry and land use sectors due to the large burned areas. The second most important thing is from wood production, and in 2018, it contributed to the net removal of CO2 emissions at the level of about 140 gigatons. The last sector is for regarding the GHG emission is the waste sector. GHG emissions from the solid waste disposal category account for up to even 90% of emissions from this sector, while emissions from the wastewater management category account for the remaining around 10%. Disposal and processing of waste mainly leads to high methane emissions, which is very potent GHG, which is even whose strength is even 25 times bigger than CO2. Emissions from solid waste disposal category account for even 95% of total methane emission from this sector. Wastewater treatment and discharge produce relatively minor emissions of methane and nitrogen oxide of maximum 8%. Now, in order just to speed up entire presentation, just to inform you that Montenegro does not produce ozone-depleting substances. The entire quantity of this kind of substances here in Montenegro is fully important, and we have in place put a so-called plan for the elimination of these kind of substances from a Montenegrin market. For sure, gradually and in phases, which is in accordance with the requirements of the Montreal Protocol. Now, finally, what Montenegro needs to do in this very complex and specific area in the coming period. First of all, what must be kept in mind is that climate change will continue to create significant stress in Montenegro. Although I said at the beginning of my presentation that Montenegro is a pretty low emitter of GHG gases, we belong to this part of Europe, which is highly exposed and mostly vulnerable to the adverse and negative effects of climate change. So it is expected that there will be an increase in temperatures and decrease in precipitation, which will affect all our ecosystems, both terrestrial and marine, and their biodiversity. Therefore, in addition of all mitigation measures, a significant part of the investments should be aimed at encouraging and strengthening the climate resilience of Montenegro until at least 2030, which will have positive repercussions not only to Montenegro as such, but to the entire region of the Western Balkans, which, as I've already said, is exposed to the inevitable impact of climate change. In accordance with the EU strategy for adaptation to climate change, opportunities for wider implementation of NBS, so-called nature-based solutions, prevention and preparedness, investments in climate change protection, increase in natural and artificial CO2 sinks, review of currently some unsustainable investments in infrastructure and energy, and connecting work on implementation of legislation on climate change with all the activities in the area of civil protection, some emergency situation, mechanism of civil protection and responsible action have to be deeply explored. The priority for our country in the EU accession process is definitely transposition of the newly adopted so-called EU climate law, which is the first binding piece of legislation in the European Union, which sets target of Europe becoming the first climate neutral continent until 2050. Also, one of the priorities is to transpose the so-called Fit for 55 package in order to be ready to ensure the full green transformation of all economic sectors here in Montenegro, with a focus on those which are the most carbon intensive, but also to establish a long-term strategic framework for low carbon development. It is also necessary to develop a national energy and climate plan, which will be the new national energy strategy for Montenegro, and to establish so-called transitional both climate and energy goals for 2030. In accordance with the increased ambitions of the European Union, and to achieve the integration of a climate and energy framework by 2030 in all relevant sectoral policies and strategies. And finally, in order to achieve a reduction of greenhouse gases emissions, at least by 55% until 2030, but definitely to reach these net zero emissions by 2050, it is necessary that Montenegro fully implements Paris Agreement, which was ratified in 2017 in our country. To fulfill this revised national determined contribution I presented in some of the previous slides, but at the same time not to endanger development of all our economic sector, which is very difficult and complex task in order to have proper balance with reaching high climate ambitions and to have proper economic activities ongoing in all sectors such as industry, energy, agriculture, land use, forestry, transport, and so on. So thank you very much for your attention. I'm ready to hear if there are some questions, some comments, or anything like that regarding my presentation. Thank you once again.
Hello everyone, I am Danijela Dedeić, representative from Institute of Hydrometeorology and Seismology of Montenegro. And today I'm here to substitute of Branko Mice, who is Deputy Director of Meteorology Sector in our institution. And for all additional questions, please send me or my email address, and Branko will answer you, because Branko have more experience about climate change. Today I will present presentation about current trends and approaches in climate change assessment in Montenegro. This is a long presentation, but we listen in 3 days of presentation, and we are a little tired about that. I'll be short. Over the past 17 years, the trends of increasing average air temperature has been significant in Montenegro, both annually and seasonally. The period between 1991 to 2020 is warmer in Podgorica by about 1.10 degrees. Contemporary climate changes is extreme weather events have not based Montenegro. Over the past 17 years, the average air temperature has increased significantly in our country, both annually and seasonally. Looking at the average value in Podgorica, for example, winters become warming by about 0.15 degrees per decade, and summers by 0.37 degrees per decade. On annually basis, the period 1991-2020 is warmer in Podgorica by about 1.10 degrees compared to the previous 30 years for this period. And in Montenegro, there is a lot talking about climate change, but little is being done to reduce consequences. And today we live in area of climate change, which in the opinion of many is faster and more intense than those of previous areas. The fact is that the planet is warming, and as a result, the frequency and the intensity of extreme weather and climate even has increased. There are regional differences, air temperature rise. Regional changes in the regime and amount of precipitation are even more noticeable. Some regions and countries are become more arid and some more humid, while three are also areas where dry and extreme rainy periods alternative with floods. In Montenegro, a representative example of climate change is disappearing glacial Biogradsko Lake, which located in the heart of Bjelasica mountain. As you can see, this is first picture for June 2021, and second picture is from August 2022. For just 1 year, and the amount of water in Biogradsko Lake is significantly decreased. This is just 1 year. In Montenegro, we have around 29 glacial lakes. I have around because some of them is periodically, and everywhere is the same situation. Vulnerability to climate change and adaptation measures. Droughts have been more frequent in Montenegro since 1990. 4 major droughts occurred during the period 2003-2011. The droughts of 2011 became a social and economic challenge that affected the whole country and led to an extreme hydrological deficit in the region for Zem, Zeta and Belopelici area. In addition, heat waves are becoming more frequent and longer. The strong heat waves that hit Montenegro in 2012 affected 4,500 people. Montenegro experienced 3 major floods. First was 2007, second 2009, and 2010. Flood during 2010 caused damage estimated to around 44 million euros. And also fires as a consequence of climate change. Montenegro forests have been repeatedly threatened by wildfire caused by climate changes. In period, in period 2005-2015, there were about 8 major forest fires, and over 18,000 hectares of forest and over 800,000 cubic meters on wood pulp were damaged or destroyed. The worst fire season in Montenegro was 2017, with 124 recorded fire on over 30 hectares, which affected in total area 51,661. And the warms decade signs the start of measurements. State of global climate in the 2022 by World Meteorological Organization. From mountain peaks to ocean depth, climate change continued its advance in 2022. Droughts, floods, and heat waves affected communities on every continent and cost many billions of dollars. Antarctic sea ice fell to its lowest extent to record, and the melting of some European glaciers was literally off the charts. For global temperature, 2015-2022 were the 8 warms on record, despite the cooling impact on the La Niña, even for the past 3 years. Melting of the glaciers and sea level rise, which again reached recording level 2022, will continue for up to thousands of years. And you can see whole world is facing with high temperature. This is map of maximum temperature recording of all the world. This is state of climate in Europe. Temperature in Europe have increased at more twice the global average over the past 30 years, the heights of many continents in the world. as the warming trend continues, exceptional heat, wildfires, floods, and other climate change impact will affect society, economies, and ecosystem. We lost 30 meters of glaciers in Alpine, and that is amazing information. Observed climate changes and extreme events in Montenegro. As you can see, that is table of global warming in Montenegro. That is data for our institution, that is from Branko sectors. And here are some observed extreme meteorological events in Montenegro. I don't read that because you can found in my presentation. And the heat wave in 2007 and the situation before reaching the absolute maximum air temperature record in Montenegro. This is 2007 years and this is August 2007 years. In Podgorica we have 44.8 degrees. In that amount we have 27 tropical nights and 30 tropical days. And February and March 2018, February 2018, we have new records of air temperature, precipitation, and dry. And March 2018, a new record of total precipitation. This is August 2018, that is very dry period for Montenegro. Stormy weather in Podgorica accompanied by heavy rain and hail up to 5 centimeters in diameter. In this diagram you can see maximum temperature for Podgorica, that is August, for period 1949-1999. And also maximum temperature for Podgorica, the period for August 2000 to 2017. And in contrast of the heat, we have snowfall. This is picture from Žabljak, that is 20 March 2007. Over 15 centimeters of snow is for very, very short time. We have a big problem then. This is picture from Rožaje, that is small town in the north of Montenegro. This is 27 November 2007. And then we have state of emergency situation declared, also snowfall. This is extreme snowfall, also Montenegro, 2012. I think this is picture from Plav, north of Montenegro, north. And floods. We have a problem with floods every year. This is Danilovgrad, 2010, and Zeta River. Droughts, agricultural and hydrological, presentation deficit in the region, September 2018. And this is from detecting via satellite, remote detection of the state of vegetation. Second diagram. And this is some slides from Europe. This is flooding in Germany that was happened in the July 14 and 15. This is the western region. Then 190 people lost their lives. Large material losses, approx 30 billion euros, huge deposits and salt of tons of cars, destroyed highways. And 180 liters rain fell per square meter in just for 21 hours. And also fires, outdoor and urban fires in Turkey, that was happened in July 2021. I think everybody remember this. This is some about climate change. This is report from third national report of Montenegro on climate change. And how you can see there is very worrying information. This is also information from Third National Communication, is really worried, and you can see that by 2100, temperature will rise by 50.5 degrees. And about climate change, change in amount of precipitation of Podgorica and Žabljak. Significantly climate anomaly in temperature in September 2020 at the time of grain harvest. Maximum daily temperatures were 35 to 36 degrees. Large temperature deviation for the climatic norm for 3 days. That is from red roads. How you can see climate change research and detection. You can see table, and in this table you can see that temperature is growing year by year. This is data for our institution, from Institute of Hydrometeorology and Seismology of Montenegro. And climate change research detection, that is wrinkle index. I don't know more about wrinkle index, but Branko is answer if somebody interested about it. And climate change research, this is automatic meteorological station in Vineyard in Montenegro. This is some instruments from Plantage. Plantage is our large vineyard plantation in Podgorica. This is some Montenegrin publication on climate changes. And for the end, this is picture from the Bay of Boka Kotorska. And after next presentation, we go right there. And some, okay, thank you for your attention and enjoy in Montenegro.
Hello everybody, thank you for invitation. I'm Dragan Radojević from Geological Survey of Montenegro, and I'm hydrogeologist. I will present 4 topics, mostly related for groundwaters and water sources. First topic is already presented by previous presenters, Danijela, and she talked, it's related to projected climate change in Montenegro on basis of third national report and its basis of scenario RSP 8.5 to the end of this century, for the period to the end of this century. And this scenario, RSP 8.5, is not optimistic scenario, is some then we will use fossil fuels until the end of this century, and this is common truth of this scenario because recently we followed that practice to use fossil fuels. That's in that scenario. According to that scenario, temperature will be growing, have a growing trend, and in Montenegro will be the climatic condition will be characterized by a significant increase in number of summer days, the number of tropical days and nights, and that is most interested and related for our topic for vineyard and wine culture. Similar is precipitation, but by this scenario we have decreasing of average annual precipitation in Montenegro. But what is more arid precipitation regime we accepted, and with average annual negative anomalies from -5 to -10% primary as consequence of possible decrease in summer precipitation. That is precipitation that is related to the growing period for agriculture. And the number of consecutive days without precipitation will increase in future, and that is actually droughts. When we have growing of consecutive days without precipitation. There is one project that is related that is convenient of major for climate and energy, and in that project now is included 4 municipalities for Montenegro: Podgorica, Tivat, Kolašina, and Pljevlja, and they committed to create a sustainable energy and climate action plan, SECAP, by 2030, and following this action plan and reducing CO2 emission. And risk and vulnerability assessment, RVA, represent the basis for strategic planning on local authorities, the impact of climate change on resource and populations. And in framework RVA, it is interaction of climate-related hazards like hazards, vulnerabilities, and exposure of human system, ecosystem, and biodiversity. This is methodology for that project, and each municipality monitoring 6 sectors: infrastructure, tourism, national resource, agriculture, forestry, health, and water management. Related to climate change and following extreme weather events, and analyzed in this project is heavy rains, extreme heats, extreme colds, droughts, and storm with cyclones. Some of these events are more specific for northern municipalities, some are more specific for southern coastal or Podgorica municipalities, but for all we analyzed it. And some vulnerability indicators related for water management Podgorica are falling water levels in individual wells, and that is limiting factor for local agriculture and households. The lack of water in local wells leads to use more expensive waters from water supplies, and growth of water consumptions require additional waters, require additional infrastructures, water and sewage infrastructure. And some indicators are water levels in wells, water quality, price of water, increase in water loss, increase in water consumption. Podgorica use spring water for public water supplies, and that spring water is very vulnerable to climate change. An alarming trend is decreasing the level of groundwater in numerous individual wells in Zeta plain. And that is partly consequence of climate change and partly consequence of anthropogenic factor. And that anthropogenic factor is intensive exploitation for gravel in Morač riverbed. And that is connected with significant reduction of water yield in the Bolje Sestre karst spring, and Bolje Sestre is main source of captured for the regional water supply for Montenegrin coast. Like I said before, karst aquifers are very vulnerable to climate change, both in terms of yield and quality of water. Quantity and quality of water, both are affected with climate change. Agricultural sector in Podgorica, we analyze vulnerability of that sector too, and the soil is vulnerable to climate change, increasing temperatures and increasing intensity of precipitation accelerates soil erosion and loss of organic materials. Duration of growing season is increased because all the factors, primary temperatures, increasing temperatures, and further increase is predicted for the near future. That is connected with more demands for waters. And analysis and monitoring of occurrence of droughts must be a priority because it represents the main limiting factor for the production of crops. And last is the largest number of grape and wine production, more than 97% in Montenegro is in basin of Lake Skadar, and it is belonging to municipality of Podgorica, and total of about 10 million wine trees were recorded in Podgorica. And this is risk treatment that is proposed for the municipalities, and this is related for the water treatments, for decreasing groundwater level, activities, hydrogeological research, and construction of new wells, monitoring of groundwater levels, and so on, of regime of water, change in turbidity or chemical status of water source, activities, early warning system, increasing is water consumption, activity proposed for municipalities is reduction of losses in network, controlling illegal connections, and building a new infrastructure. And last risk is excessive use of water due to extreme droughts and strain on water infrastructures, and activities, preparation of institutional agreement and new association of water use to prevent problems with water owners and water usage. Viticulture and water use, that is my third topic. Key resource in wine industry is availability of water. Infrastructure is now not like in past, now is very cheap. Building of wells cheap and available of pumps. I think it's like 2,000-3,000 euros every house, and small farmers can build wells with pumping, and consequence of that in Zeta plan almost every small farmer has his own well, and capacity is about 1 liter per second of groundwater. That is not small amount of water. It's if we use that for water supply, it's about small village of 100 people. And the number of individual wells is estimated of about several thousand, few thousand wells. And you can imagine quantity of water that small farmers using just in Zeta plain. And largest vineyard in Montenegro, Plantage, use large amount of groundwater through several large wells. And that amount of water is it's like production of Mareza. Plantage use similar amount of water like Podgorica, completely Podgorica for water supply. And now the longer the dry period in vegetative period, the more water is needed. That is logically, and what is interesting for using water for agriculture in Podgorica, especially in Podgorica, because high temperature, it's enormous evapotranspiration in summer period, and most of water that we irrigate evaporate, and underground we haven't a return in underground. Evaporate at least 90% of water that we irrigate. That means we have with irrigation we have big spending. It's opposite with usage water for houses, drinking, for I don't know other purpose for industry, because that waters come back but in irrigation we practically use all amount of water. And due to several factors, some of which are climate change and increased irrigation, the groundwater level in Zeta plain decreasing several meters in just 10 years, and many of old wells are completely dry up now, and average is 3 meters decreased or something like that. That means very big pressure of Zeta Valley aquifer. And now last topic, challenge and recommendation. In order to harmonize law of water in Montenegro with EU water directives, and as well we need to close chapter 27, Montenegro will soon face challenge in irrigation and viticulture sector. Currently, no any agriculture company or vineyard in Montenegro do not pay any concession fee for water use, and haven't any concessions regulatives. Not even the largest one haven't any concessions and fees for water use. That is maybe that temporarily is big. Maybe because that using water in vineyard is not. It's like normal, like what, but it's not normal. It must be. If we want to close chapter 27, it must be regulated. There is no record who use groundwaters or surface waters, how much we use waters for irrigations, and uncontrolled use of water leads to lack during the growing season. Like mentioned in previous chapter, most of all the wells in Zeta Valley dry up completely, and decreasing of water level is more than 3 meters per some wells. Overexploitation in groundwaters in Ulcinj, for example, leads to seawater intrusion in fresh groundwaters. We have in these pictures example from one spring gulch in Ulcinj, where we have 12 pumps that use water just for irrigation. And that big pressure to fresh waters leading to intrusion of sea waters. It's similar situation in another place in coastal, like in Tivat Valley, where we have in Lastva, where we have similar agricultural demand. And the conclusion is that wine production must adapt to the future water supply problem caused by climate change, and as well as inevitable institutional and administrative regulation. And that is, I don't know, topic last 10 years, and problems how to institutional, is not just in Montenegro, it's similar. In Croatia have big problem with that. Small production in small agriculture holders in Croatia, for example, they try remote sensing with satellite or I don't know drones to spot the wells, and usually agriculture owners put something on wells like a car or something like this, and it's not possible to notice from the air. And I know that is challenge, but in that ways, wine producers must to know that water is it's very important factor for the production. Thank you.